Karoline Leavitt strode into the modern press room with her signature calm confidence. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with anticipation, and the hum of conversation slowly died down as every pair of eyes fixed on her. "Good afternoon, everyone," she said in a clear, measured tone that left little room for misinterpretation. "Let's get straight to business." It wasn't long before a stirring voice cut through the hush. From among the sea of reporters, a young female journalist with sharp eyes and a determined stance stood up. Her name was Milan, and she was known for her fearless approach and willingness to ask the questions that others hesitated to voice. Clutching her microphone, Milan stepped forward, her tone both challenging and earnest. "Ms. Leavitt," Milan began, her voice carrying across the room, "there are reports indicating that the new economic policies may inadvertently disadvantage certain vulnerable groups. Could you please confirm whether these policies are designed, perhaps indirectly, to suppress those who are already marginalized?" For a moment, the room fell silent, a heavy pause filled with both tension and expectation. Karoline's expression remained unreadable as she took a slow breath, her eyes scanning the room. "I've addressed similar questions before, Milan," she replied evenly. "Our policies are intended to benefit all Americans, ensuring that no one is left behind. If you have another question related to today's topic, I'd be happy to answer." But Milan wasn't ready to let the matter drop. With a subtle shift in her stance and a glimmer of defiance in her eyes, she pressed on. "But the independent data we're seeing seems to suggest otherwise. Could you confirm whether these figures are being manipulated to obscure the true impact of your policies on economically disadvantaged communities?" As soon as the words left her mouth, a murmur swept through the crowd. Journalists exchanged looks and scribbled down notes as they recorded every nuance of this unfolding drama. Karoline's eyes flicked briefly toward the security team, a silent signal that she was prepared for a storm. "I'm here to provide clarity, not to engage in theatrics," she said, her voice calm yet firm. "Our figures are transparent and subject to public scrutiny. If you'd like to move on to a different question that aligns with today's agenda, I am more than willing to oblige." Milan leaned forward, her voice rising slightly, carrying a mix of challenge and genuine concern. "Then please tell us, Ms. Leavitt, why is it that when independent analysts compare the official numbers with grassroots reports, there's a persistent discrepancy? Is this a deliberate attempt to paint a rosier picture, or is it simply a case of poor data management?" At that moment, the atmosphere in the room grew palpably thicker. Every eye was glued to the podium as Karoline's face, usually so composed, showed the faintest hint of strain. Taking a measured pause, she shifted her gaze from one journalist to the next, as if silently asking them to hold their breath. "I assure you," Karoline said steadily, "our data is vetted thoroughly. We are committed to transparency, and any discrepancies that might arise are quickly addressed through our internal review processes." "But isn't it true," Milan countered, her tone now edged with frustration, "that your department has revised these numbers more than once over the past few months? How can we be sure that what you're presenting today is the full, unvarnished truth?" A hush descended over the room, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though time itself had slowed. Karoline's eyes narrowed imperceptibly, and she raised her hand in a gesture that commanded quiet. "I have provided comprehensive answers on this matter before, and I assure you there is nothing to hide," she said. "I am here to discuss today's economic agenda, not to rehash debates that have already been settled." The tension in the room escalated further as Milan's smile turned sardonic. "Then why do we continuously see a pattern of evasion when it comes to these pressing issues? Transparency, after all, should mean directly addressing even the toughest questions. Could it be that you're reluctant to confront the underlying problems?" At that point, the camera lenses began to move in closer. The air practically vibrated with the promise of a story unfolding live before millions. Karoline's gaze shifted for just a moment to the security personnel stationed at the door, a silent signal that she was not in the mood to continue this line of questioning. "I have already answered your question fully," Karoline said, her tone cool and resolute. "If you have another question that is truly relevant to our discussion today, please ask." Otherwise, I will move on to another reporter. Mylan's eyes flashed, and for a split second, it seemed as though the entire room held its breath. So you're saying that if I ask another question, you'll simply change the subject? She asked, her tone both incredulous and challenging. How can the American public trust the transparency you so often tout when it appears that you're avoiding the real issues? The tension mounted to a crescendo as Karoline's jaw tightened, and her voice took on an edge of finality. I respect the role of a free press, she stated. But there's a difference between pursuing accountability and manufacturing conflict for the sake of sensational headlines. I will answer questions that are pertinent to today's briefing. If your intent is solely to create a spectacle, then I suggest you refrain from further disruption. At that moment, the atmosphere shifted imperceptibly but unmistakably. A few cameras swung between Karoline and Mylan, capturing every subtle movement, every flicker of emotion. In the background, a security officer made a discreet gesture, and within seconds, Mylan was politely but firmly escorted away from the podium. The hushed exclamations of the gathered press were almost audible, their pens racing across notepads as they documented the incident. Outside the room, whispers and murmurs started to ripple through the crowd. On social media, hashtags like #TransparencyOrTheatrics and #Karoline Leavitt began to trend almost immediately, sparking heated debates among viewers. Meanwhile, inside the press room, Karoline's colleagues exchanged worried glances. Everyone knew that this brief encounter could be the spark that ignited a wildfire of public outrage. Karoline paused for a moment, taking in the charged atmosphere. "I'm not here to play games," she declared, her tone softer yet imbued with an undeniable firmness. "Our policy decisions are made with the public interest at heart. I ask that you let the facts speak for themselves." A beat of silence followed, and then a new reporter from the back of the room tentatively raised his hand. "Ms. Leavitt, if I might, given the controversy this has already generated online, could you share how your department plans to address these concerns publicly, especially with so many calling for a more in-depth explanation?" Karoline's eyes softened ever so slightly as she turned toward the new question, perhaps aware that the situation was spiraling beyond a single exchange. "Thank you," she said, her voice measured and inviting. "What we do is we allow for an open review of our data. Any discrepancies that are flagged are thoroughly investigated, and we make the results public as soon as possible. Our goal is not to hide behind numbers, but to build trust through transparent, accountable governance." Her answer, though composed, did little to calm the surging storm of opinions outside the room. Even as the full, unedited footage of her exchange with Mylan was posted online within minutes, the digital sphere erupted in debate. Some praised Karoline for her steadfast control, arguing that her refusal to be baited into a game of theatrics was exactly what was needed in these turbulent times. Others, however, saw her actions as an overreach, a deliberate attempt to silence dissenting voices under the guise of maintaining order. The narrative that began to form online was multifaceted. Conservative commentators hailed Karoline's measured response as a necessary measure to protect the integrity of the briefing, while many on the left decried the incident as a stark example of how dissent was being stifled in modern politics. Headlines ranging from "Karoline Leavitt, champion of transparency," to "silencing the press." The hidden agenda behind today's briefing proliferated across news outlets, each fragment of commentary adding to the swirling maelstrom of opinions. Later that afternoon, inside the press room's control center, Karoline sat before a bank of monitors, her eyes fixed on the rolling tide of social media reactions. "Look at this," she murmured, scrolling through a feed of tweets, posts, and live updates. "They're already painting me as the villain, even though all I did was stick to the facts." Her aide, a pragmatic and sharp-eyed young professional, leaned in. "The full video is up, and it's getting traction fast," he said quietly. "Some networks are already planning roundtable discussions on the incident." Karoline let out a measured sigh. "I'm not here to be the subject of a media frenzy," she said. "The truth is out there. All we need to do now is let the public see the full picture. I've always believed that when you let the facts speak for themselves, the narrative will eventually settle." Her aide nodded, understanding the unspoken battle that lay ahead. A battle not just of policies, but of perception. They're calling for a follow-up briefing, he noted. But maybe it's best if we allow the situation to cool down first. The conversation drifted, and soon Karoline found herself alone with her thoughts. She leaned back in her chair, recalling the brief but fierce encounter with Milan. In that moment, she realized that the true challenge wasn't merely in defending policy. It was in navigating the complex, often treacherous realm of public opinion, where every word could be weaponized and every gesture scrutinized. As evening approached, the tension in the digital sphere remained unabated. The hashtag transparency or theatrics continued to trend, and discussions on various platforms delved into the ethics of press conferences in a digital age. Karoline's decision to release the unedited footage was seen by some as an act of honesty, while others argued it was a calculated move designed to deflect criticism. In a late-night interview with a respected news anchor on a major network, Karoline was asked directly about the incident. Ms. Leavitt, do you believe that your handling of today's briefing was necessary to maintain order, or do you think it might have been perceived as an attempt to silence dissent? The anchor inquired, leaning forward as if to catch every nuance of her response. Karoline's eyes met the camera, steady and unwavering. I believe that maintaining order and focusing on the issues at hand is critical, especially when we're discussing policies that affect millions of Americans, she replied, her tone conversational yet imbued with an air of authority. It's not about silencing dissent. It's about ensuring that our discussions remain constructive. When the focus shifts from policy to spectacle, the truth can be obscured by sensationalism. That evening, as Karoline sat in her office, her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from colleagues, journalists, and even political commentators. One message from a close ally read simply, "Smart move. This will take the wind out of their sails." Another, more critical note warned, "You just played into their narrative. They're going to use this against you." Karoline rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of the day's events. "I knew this was coming," she thought aloud, half to herself and half to the empty room. The moment I saw that determined look in Milan's eyes, I understood that this wasn't just about economics or policy. It was about controlling the narrative. Later, as she reviewed the flood of headlines and video clips that had emerged in the hours following the briefing, Karoline couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction and apprehension. On one screen, a well-known conservative pundit was discussing how her handling of the press demonstrated a commitment to accountability and control. On another, a passionate segment on a left-leaning channel condemned the incident as an attack on journalistic freedom. "I'm not here to please everyone," Karoline murmured. "I'm here to serve the truth." She paused, scrolling through the endless commentary. At the end of the day, the facts are what matter, not the spin or the sensational headlines. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled, and the murmur of the evening traffic provided a steady, almost hypnotic backdrop to her thoughts. She recalled the conversation she had earlier with her aide, about the delicate balance between being transparent and being seen as confrontational. "We need to let the public decide," she had said. "Once they see the full video, they'll understand that I wasn't evading questions. I was just ensuring that the discussion stayed on track." The next morning, a new day dawned with fresh headlines and renewed debates. Karoline found herself facing a barrage of questions in follow-up interviews, but the intensity of the previous day had mellowed the tone of the inquiries. Journalists now asked for more detailed explanations of the policy, and while some still referenced the previous confrontation, the overall focus had shifted back to the substance of the briefing. During one particularly candid interview with a veteran journalist known for his balanced perspective, Karoline recounted her experience from the previous day. "It was one of those moments where you realize that the battle isn't just over facts or figures," she said, speaking as though she were sharing a personal anecdote with a trusted friend. "It's about perception, about the way every action is amplified in the digital age. I wasn't trying to silence a reporter. I was trying to keep the conversation constructive." Her words resonated with some and drew criticism from others, but Karoline remained steadfast in her approach. "The truth," she continued in that interview, "is a fragile thing in today's world. It's easily manipulated by those who know how to create a narrative that fits their agenda. My role is to ensure that, as much as possible, we're left with a clear, unfiltered view of reality. As the days turned into weeks, the incident at the press conference became a case study in media studies programs and a topic of heated debate among political commentators. Social media continued to buzz with comparisons, memes, and lengthy threads dissecting every second of that fateful exchange. Karoline found herself at the center of a media maelstrom, with opinions divided sharply along ideological lines. One afternoon, while driving through the city in a quiet moment of respite, Karoline reflected on the events. "You know," she said quietly to herself, "every move I make is going to be scrutinized. It's not enough to just be right. You have to be seen as right, too." Her thoughts wandered back to that press room, to Milan's relentless questioning, and to the powerful imagery of security gently escorting a determined reporter out of the room. "But if I let that moment define me, then I've already lost," she mused. "The real test is in how I steer the conversation afterward." Back at headquarters, Karoline and her team spent hours drafting a comprehensive statement that would both clarify the policy details and address the media's concerns about transparency. The statement was released along with the full, unedited video of the press conference, a decision that, they hoped, would cut through the layers of edited clips and partisan spin. "Let the public decide for themselves," Karoline had written in the accompanying note. "Because the truth is, as always, in the details." The statement was met with mixed reactions. Some praised it as a refreshing act of honesty, while others argued that it only further polarized an already divided public. In the days that followed, numerous panel discussions and talk shows dissected the incident. Experts weighed in on the challenges of modern journalism, debating whether the incident was a sign of a broader problem in the media or simply an isolated moment of heightened tension. During one lively roundtable discussion on a popular cable news program, a renowned media analyst summed it up in a conversational tone that captured the complexity of the situation. "What we're seeing here isn't just a clash of personalities, it's a clash of systems. On one side, you have the old-school idea that a press conference should be a straightforward, factual presentation. On the other, you have a new reality where every word, every gesture, is broadcast and amplified, sometimes beyond its original context." Karoline's handling of the situation, whether you agree with her or not, is a reflection of that tension. The analyst continued, "In today's media landscape, the moment a reporter steps out of line, it's not just an isolated incident. It becomes a symbol, a representation of larger issues like media bias, accountability, and the fine line between journalism and activism. And that's why even a brief exchange can go viral. It speaks to a deeper discontent with the way information is filtered and presented to us." Karoline listened to these discussions with a mixture of weariness and resolve. She knew that her actions had been both praised and vilified, and that in the court of public opinion, every move would be scrutinized. But amid the cacophony of voices, one message remained clear in her mind. The public deserved to see the full, unedited truth. "If I can help people understand the context," she often told her team, "then maybe, just maybe, we can have a conversation that isn't just about blame or sensationalism, but about real, substantive issues." Over the following weeks, the conversation began to shift. While the incident remained a hot topic on social media and in editorials, there was also a growing interest in discussing the underlying issues at stake. Town hall meetings, online forums, and community discussions sprang up, where citizens debated everything from the merits of the new policies to the responsibilities of a free press in a digital age. One evening, Karoline attended a small, private dinner with a group of local community leaders and independent journalists. The conversation was relaxed, yet charged with the same energy that had defined the press conference. Over a meal of hearty food and amid casual laughter, one of the journalists leaned forward and said, "Karoline, what happened the other day? It wasn't just about a question or an answer. It was about setting a precedent. People will remember this as the moment when a press conference wasn't just a press conference, but a turning point in how we view accountability and transparency." Karoline nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I understand," she replied softly. And I know that every decision I make in moments like these can either build trust or deepen the divide. All I can do is remain steadfast in my commitment to the truth. I believe that, ultimately, the truth will prevail, even if the path there is muddied by spin and spectacle. The conversation continued late into the night, with everyone sharing their views on how best to navigate the increasingly complex interplay between policy, media, and public perception. It was a candid, unscripted discussion, a stark contrast to the orchestrated events of the press conference. And as the dinner wound down, there was a sense of cautious optimism in the air. Perhaps, after all, the incident could serve as a catalyst for a more informed and honest public discourse. In the weeks and months that followed, the incident at the press conference remained a subject of discussion not only in political circles but also in academic studies and media analysis. Karoline found herself invited to various panels and forums to discuss the evolving role of the press in the digital era. In one such forum, held at a well-known journalism school, a professor asked, "Ms. Leavitt, do you feel that the expectation of absolute transparency in today's media environment is realistic, or is it just a wishful ideal?" Karoline responded in a reflective, conversational manner. "Transparency is both a goal and a challenge. We strive for it, yet we must also recognize that in our fast-paced, ever-changing media landscape, every detail can be taken out of context or spun to fit a narrative. My hope is that by releasing the full footage and providing detailed explanations, we can empower the public to see the complete picture and not just the fragments that are easily shared on social media." Her remarks resonated with many, sparking a broader debate about the responsibilities of both the government and the press. The incident had become more than just a moment of conflict. It had grown into a symbol of the struggles inherent in trying to maintain integrity in a world where every second is recorded and dissected. As time went on, Karoline's legacy was shaped not only by that one press conference, but also by her continued efforts to engage in genuine dialogue with the public. She made herself available for town hall meetings, Q&A sessions on social media, and interviews that delved into the nuances of policymaking. In these settings, she was far more relaxed, her conversational tone inviting genuine questions and even challenging feedback. "I welcome your questions," she would say with a warm smile. "Let's talk about the facts, the figures, and the real impact these policies have on everyday people." Yet, even as she embraced this more open approach, the memory of that contentious exchange with Milan lingered, a reminder of the delicate balance between maintaining control of the narrative and genuinely engaging with those who sought to hold power accountable. It was a moment that had sparked both fierce criticism and heartfelt support, and it continued to serve as a touchstone for debates about press freedom, accountability, and the role of narrative in modern politics. Looking back on it all, Karoline often reflected on the lessons learned. In this age of digital outrage, she mused during one quiet moment in her office. We must be prepared not only to answer questions but also to navigate a battlefield of opinions and emotions. It's not enough to simply state the facts. The way those facts are perceived is just as important as the facts themselves. And with that realization, she redoubled her commitment to clarity and transparency, understanding that every word she spoke could help shape a more informed and engaged public. As the days turned into months, the once controversial incident began to fade from the front pages, replaced by new headlines and fresh challenges. But the conversation it ignited continued to ripple through society. Journalists, politicians, and citizens alike debated the fine line between maintaining order and stifling dissent. And while opinions remained sharply divided, there was a growing consensus that perhaps the most important thing was not to let sensational moments overshadow the real issues at hand, the issues that truly affected people's lives. One crisp autumn afternoon, Karoline was invited to a televised roundtable discussion on national policy. Sitting alongside a diverse panel of experts and fellow policymakers, she revisited some of the questions raised during that fateful press conference. "There's no doubt that every public official is under constant scrutiny," she remarked casually, speaking as though discussing an everyday occurrence. "But when you're dealing with matters of national importance, it's crucial that we focus on the substance rather than getting caught up in the theatrics of a moment." Her conversational tone, a mix of candor and measured assurance, helped to reframe the discussion. The dialogue was open and unscripted, much like the genuine conversations she had fostered in the aftermath of the controversy. And while the memory of that charged day still lingered in some quarters, the emphasis was now on moving forward and addressing the underlying issues with honesty and rigor. In that moment, as the camera panned across the round table and the discussion delved into policy details, Karoline realized that every challenge, no matter how intense or divisive, presented an opportunity to engage with the public, to clarify misconceptions, and to reaffirm a commitment to truth in an era where that truth was constantly under attack. So, as the conversation unfolded that day, Karoline spoke not just as a spokesperson, but as a guardian of a broader principle. That in our digital age, while narratives may be manipulated and headlines may be spun, the enduring power of transparency and genuine dialogue remains the cornerstone of a healthy democracy. And that, as she would often say in the quiet moments before the cameras turned on, is the ultimate measure of integrity, both for those in power and for the press that holds them accountable. This story captures a day in the life of Karoline Leavitt as she navigates a turbulent press conference with the fearless Milan, showcasing the high-stakes interplay between policy, media scrutiny, and public perception. The narrative is conversational in tone, drawing you into the immediacy of every exchanged word and gesture. And it highlights how moments of tension can quickly morph into defining episodes in the battle for narrative control. The detailed account, filled with reflective asides and candid discussions, illustrates not only the power of a single confrontation to go viral, but also the enduring impact it can have on the larger conversation about transparency, accountability, and the role of the free press in modern society. Through this unfolding drama, we witness the duality of modern communication, the necessity for clear, factual discourse, and the inevitable overlay of performance in an age where every moment is broadcast live and dissected in real time. Karoline's steadfast commitment to letting the unedited truth speak for itself stands as a testament to her belief that, despite the noise and spin, a measured, honest discussion is the only way forward. And as the story ripples through social media and into the annals of political debate, it leaves us with a lasting question. How do we, as a society, value truth in an era where every headline is a battle for perception? This is the story of one day, one press conference, and one unforgettable exchange that forever altered the landscape of modern media and continues to resonate in every conversation about the balance between power, accountability, and the relentless pursuit of truth.